Hello, Chris Richter here. Welcome back again. It's good to have you. It's been a little while. What I wanted to do was to show you how to create an activity that uses a bit of JavaScript and some HTML. And it's in response to a question I had in one of my videos. So somebody actually asked for this, or to see if I could show them how to do this. It's a self-assessment activity, meaning it doesn't go back to the Moodle platform or to any LMS. It's just for a user to attempt, have a go at, and gives them the response straight away. So this is what it looks like, and this is how it works. And then I'll go through and show you how the code works, and you can give that a go yourself. We've got a row on a table that gives the student the option, or the user the option, of choosing never, sometimes, and always. And they can only choose any of those or one of those options for each row. So the idea is they ask the question, do you exercise every day? And they go sometimes. Do you brush your teeth every day? And they go always. Do you go for a walk every day? They go sometimes. Do you read every day? Never. And do you, whatever the question is. The idea is that each of these answers are weighted. So they get a score at the end of this that tells them their result and how well they've done. So quite simply, they click on check and it will give them a score based on the value of their options. In this case, I set the values to be 1 for the first column. So anything in the first column will be 1. Any of these ones are 2, and any of these ones are 3. So the reason I got 5 is because we got 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 1 more is 4, plus 1 more is 5. It was 0 for this one. You can change those values, and I'll show you how to do that. When we put together, then you can just hit reset and it clears it all out again. So that's it, quite simple. Let's jump in and have a look at the code and see what the code does. Relatively simple, I think. We have up the top here our table. Here it is. It's just there's the table. It's just a table, and we have a header row. It's actually not a header row. We could make it a proper T-head row if you like, which would be better, but it's just a row with the headers in there. There's question, never, so on, down like that. Now let's have a look at the actual real part, and this is where we've got our radio buttons. So these 3 radio buttons here, 1, 2, and 3. The most important part about them is 1, that we've named them all R1. So that row has all R1 radio buttons. This row has all named R2. And there's an important reason why we name them the same. We can't have IDs the same. IDs should always be unique. But for a name, we can have the same name, which means all we have to do is in our code is ask what is the value of R1, and we'll find out the value, which is based on these values we've set here. So you can decide what value you want for each of your questions. That's totally up to you. Jump down to question 2. And question 3, question 4, it's all the same thing, all the way down to question 5, again, all the same. Then we've got our 2 buttons down the bottom here. Our RI check, which is a button primary check, is the class it's set to. The ID is RI check, and it's just a button. There's nothing that happens on that button at all. It's just RI check, and we're done. Nice and simple. Let's go and jump in and have a look at the code down the bottom here. Okay, our code is quite simple. We just have m equals 0. M is just the way of us keeping a score of the value, or the total of all of these values from each of the columns. So that's quite simple. We jump into function.ready, which is really just a way of checking that everything has loaded first into the page. So one of the dramas, or one of the dilemmas we have of using JavaScript, is that if we try and add an event listener to an element, so in this case to this button, if we try and add an event listener to register if someone's clicked on it or not, and that button hasn't yet appeared on the page, it will just error and it won't know what to do with it, so it won't happen. So this bit of code just tells the browser to wait until everything's loaded. Once it has, then move on with actually doing all of this stuff here. So docReady is just the main function that everything sits under to set our event listeners. For our event listeners, we find the reset button, which is just looking for the RI reset ID just here using getElementById. We add an event listener called click, and it calls a function called RI reset, which is just down here. What does RI reset do? RI reset is quite simple. It sets m back to 0, which is the value that we're going to have down here for our result. It then finds RI activity by ID. So all that's doing is looking for everything inside RI activity. So all of this content in here, or all these elements, because what we want to do is find all the input elements and set them back to not being checked. So to do that, we go, here we've got RI activity. We then go and look for all of the inputs, get elements by tag name. We loop through those elements and we set the checked value to false, which means it unchecks all of these. So that's the function that basically stops or clears all of those out all in one go. So that's all that part is. Again, quite simple. All right, we have an event listener for our check button as well, for this button here. And that's the sort of the main part of this particular activity. When they click on RI check, it goes and calls as an event listener. When they click, it goes to the ROCheck function, which is down here. And ROCheck, again, it's pretty simple. All it does is sets M back to 0. We first of all have to check that one of these buttons was actually selected, because if we try and get the value, so back here, that value that's here, if we try and get that value and nothing's been selected, it just throws an error. So we need to check first. So we go if document query string selector input with the name R1. So that's our first one right up there. Whoops, right up the top here. So if R1 is not checked, if R1 doesn't equal null, that means that they have actually checked a value, and then we can continue on to go and get that value. So here we go, input name R1, which one is checked? Tell us which one's checked and get the value from that. We need to convert that to an integer, because here it's actually a string. By default, for some reason, JavaScript wants it to be a string. So we convert that to an integer, and then we add it to our counter, which is M. We do that for all of them. So R1, R2, 3, 4, R5, add them all together. And then right at the end, we go and find our RI score ID, which is that one way down the bottom here. RI score, we grab that and find the inner HTML of that and just tell it to add in the word score plus M, and M is our total of all of these. As an example, if you select all of these top ones always and go check, it will give us a score of 10, because each of these are worth 2 each. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And that's basically all it does. It's quite simple. The question you'll have is, what if I want to add more rows for myself? Go into the HTML, copy the TR. So copy that in. We'll make that question number 6. And the only thing you need to do is change these R5s to R6 and the name to R6. And obviously you can change these values to whatever numbers you prefer to have. That's okay. And then go down here to our code and grab this last one here and change that to R6, because we're looking at the name R6 now, and R6, and save and run, and that's it. So now if we choose all of them along here, we should get 12 as our answer. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and that's it. I hope that's been useful to you. Like I said, this is a question asked by somebody about, can you do this, or how do we do this? If you've got any questions, feel free to throw them into the comments in there. Thank you so much for watching the videos. I'm Chris Richter, and I'll talk to you again very soon.